All right. So we're going to be talking about ancient Chinese philosophy. Uh, and again, as with the Indian philosophy, we're not going to be going into enormous depth. Rather, we're going to be looking at like some of the main ideas and contrasting like basically three main views. Well, maybe four views in there too. So first, we're going to look at the historical context, and um, this was kind of around roughly the same time as the other philosophers who we've been talking about in like the somewhere between kind of 600 BCE and 200 BCE. Uh, and as in these other places, also in China, there was a lot of war going on. And so there was a lot of social turmoil. And one of the reactions from philosophy was people thought that by spreading ideas and arguing for certain ideas, you could actually bring stability to the country. So they were hoping to address social problems by doing their philosophy and get people to behave better. So yeah, some of the people we're going to be talking about, Confucius lived from 551 to 479 BCE, and we'll be looking at Mozi and Hui Shi and Gong Sung Long and Zhuangzi. Like I said, they were from around 550 to 286 BC, so all around that time frame. And they were searching for peace, and they were interested in the ideas of the people who came before them. So we're talking about these people as ancient philosophers, but they were also looking to the past, looking for wisdom to help them. Uh, and so they thought that if you looked at the wisdom of the most successful times, then you could use those people, the ideas of those people, and it would be helpful in their troubled times. Uh, Now they were talking about like the old sages. The sages are like the wise men who imparted wisdom to society, and that's certainly an interesting idea. Uh, they could identify these people as sages. I think these days we may be a little less all agreed on who are the sages and who are not. So it's interesting that they had an idea of who they thought their old wise men were. So they were trying to achieve some kind of political unification in this time of strife. And so there was at least an element of like respecting cultural diversity and differences, but also there were kind of movements to try and get people to all pretty much believe the same. So that there's a kind of tension between the respecting diversity and trying to seek total unification. But certainly there was bits of both there. And they thought the old sages could be useful. Uh, so one of the major concepts that they were interested in was Ren. And Ren is roughly translated as humaneness. Now, the whole idea of humaneness is not necessarily one that's totally transparent. Um, it seems to be something to be being a good person and being kind to others and recognizing the humanity of other people. Part of the idea is that they thought uh, people should learn to work out what they can control and what they can't, and getting some kind of balance between those for a life of harmony. Uh, and they thought this would be a very good for society. There was also the idea of heaven. Now, heaven is not the same thing as a Christian heaven. Uh, it's more like a cosmic force which has an influence on human affairs. Now, when we looked at Indian philosophy, there was the idea of karma, and karma was a kind of cosmic force too. So, heaven means kind of something like that. And so people get controlled by this cosmic force, but at the same time, there was a belief that people had some freedom and they could choose their identity and actions, even though there were this kind of cosmic force having an influence on them. Uh, so again, it's this idea you can achieve a harmony between your own ethical behavior and being influenced by this cosmic order. And there's certainly an idea that there's a strong interconnection between nature and human existence. We're going to see that, especially when we come to Taoism. Another idea which is quite striking in this ancient Chinese philosophy is the claim that the people in charge, the kings or the rulers, have a right to be in charge. And that's known as the mandate of heaven. So heaven is the cosmic force is sort of on the side of the rulers, which is a big claim. I mean, it's not an unusual claim for rulers to make. You know, they say the reason that I can be in charge of you is that God has given me permission to do so, or God has told me that that's what I should be doing. And so if your king says, God is giving me this job, then it kind of sort of makes sense that uh, people would say, okay, well, then you can do it, so long as they believe what the king is saying. So the idea is that it's not, uh, but there are kind of limits to that. And certainly in terms of Confucius, he was saying that the king has to be behaving well. You can't just kind of be ruling without kind of having any right to rule. You have to be a benevolent ruler. And so if the ruler was a bad ruler, if they weren't being ethical, then they would lose their right to rule. So there's a strong idea that governments should be ethical, and they should also be maintaining the harmony between humans and the natural world. Hmm. Uh, Now, there's a general concept of the Tao, and in some ways, everybody can embrace some kind of idea of Tao. It simply is the idea there's a right way of doing things and achieving this balance between your individual life and the cosmic order. We're going to see different philosophers have different ideas about that. Uh, but all of it is going to be basically some way to pursue harmony. In this view, there's a hierarchy. I already talked about like the person at the top, the ruler, but there's also going to be like an aristocracy or like the people in the middle who are kind of telling other people what to do. And So that's a human created system. There's going to be bureaucracy. Just about any civilization is going to like be collecting taxes. You're going to need judges, and then you're going to have people in charge of other people. So there's human organized systems. Then there's also natural systems in the kind of cosmic order. There's nature, and so there's going to be debate about what's right there. Right. So this takes us to Confucian philosophy. And as I said, I'm not going to talk a lot about this right now, um, but uh, certainly there's stuff which seems very straightforward, like to be a good person, you have to have benevolence and righteousness. Benevolence is helping other people. Righteousness is something like following moral rules. Uh, so Confucius was certainly highly influential, and generally we think of Confucius as being very conservative. The basic attitude of Confucius is you've got the hierarchy, you've got the existing power structure, and people should just uh, learn to respect the people in charge. Often that's linked to the idea of filial piety, and we'll be talking about a lot about filial piety at a later stage. Another big idea of Confucius is that you have to be engaged in self-cultivation. We'll see this is also a big idea for Aristotle. And in some ways, it's an idea for anybody who's talking about improving society. It's the idea that people should be making themselves better people. And we can think of two aspects to that. One is morality. You work on making yourself a more moral person. And probably one of the main ways to do that is to work on your virtues, right? You can work on becoming more patient, getting less angry. You can work on not giving into temptation. Uh, you can work on getting sort of more free of your bodily desires. So all of those are sort of moral ideas. And then there's a kind of intellectual idea that you'll continue to be thinking and trying to understand the world all through your life. So Confucius thought that society should help people learn to engage in this kind of self-improvement, self-cultivation. So that's a large aspect of his view. Another very large aspect of his view is his belief in the importance of ritual. So he thinks that everyday life can involve all sorts of ritual. We're used to rituals in religious services. And we're also used to rituals in kind of big life events. You'll have gone to your high school graduation, which is kind of a ritual, right? People all gather together. People give speeches. You're wearing special clothes. And there's this kind of celebration and honoring of people. But that's not a religious ritual. So there can be all sorts of rituals. We're used to rituals like christenings and marriages and funerals. But there's also rules like people honoring the dead and even daily prayers. So there can be all sorts of rituals we have in our lives. And Confucius thought they were incredibly important, that you have to kind of keep on doing those rituals. You have to kind of keep society together, and doing those rituals will really contribute to the harmony of society. I mean, in the United States these days, many of us don't really engage in a lot of rituals. Obviously, if somebody gets married, you'll go to the wedding and so on. But a lot of us were pretty free of rituals, apart from once every few years we go to something which is a ritual. It seems like in ancient Chinese society there was a much bigger role for ritual, and so it's a little hard for us to completely understand what the rituals were, but we can get some sort of idea of what they were and how they were important for Confucius. So, as I mentioned, uh, people look back to earlier days for what was especially kind of good about, and they try to emulate that. So they were especially admiring of the Tzu and Shang dynasties because they thought they had a lot of moral integrity and virtuous governance. They really respected the strong leadership then, and so they invested in tradition and continuity. They tried to kind of keep the old traditions. So one way of keeping traditions is honoring the rituals, but there's just this idea you keep on doing things in the same way. The idea that there's a kind of set way to do things, and you shouldn't change those. I mean, I think that I mean, I grew up in the UK, and the UK is certainly a country which has quite a lot of tradition. There's things like the royal family, uh, and just kind of sort of set kind of ways of life, and people like keeping their traditions. I think in the United States, things tend to be more flexible, and people don't necessarily kind of uh, aim to keep on traditions in the same way, although it's kind of complicated because often if you have immigrants coming over to the United States, then they like to hold on to some of their traditions to keep hold of their identity. So it's a little bit mixed. But certainly for the Confucian view, it's essential to keep on doing the same sorts of traditions and keep society pretty much as it was. They also believed in the importance of having leaders who would set a good example. So the idea is you have leaders who are morally good, and then that will give an example to all the other people to copy their behavior. And so people will be moral because their leader is moral. Again, I guess we might wonder, I'm not sure what your opinion of the morality of our current leaders are, but I'm not sure that, I mean, maybe to some extent, people are influenced by the morality of their leaders and it changes their own behavior. So that, as I said, it's a fairly brief glimpse at Confucian philosophy. So now we're going to look at Mohist philosophy, which is a reaction somewhat against Confucian philosophy. So Mohism was especially associated with the philosopher Mozi. He founded the Mohist school. He lived approximately like 470 to 391 BCE. Uh, and one of the things he really emphasized was logical reasoning for all. So he thought people should be able to reason clearly, and that would be good for society. It's like trying to teach critical thinking to everybody. Certainly, it's a big emphasis on education. And he thought that if you can provide clear, accessible explanations for things, then that will be good for society. Like all of these approaches, the bottom line is what's good for society. So he wanted to achieve kind of logical soundness and make it all available to lots of people. And he wanted to have ways for people to evaluate the plausibility or strength of statements that were made. So people were able to think for themselves. So a lot of what he did laid the groundwork for later work in Chinese logic and epistemology. Epistemology is a study of the justification of knowledge. So two kind of very striking ideas in Mohism are first the idea that it's good to have shared belief, that if everybody kind of believes the same, that's good for society. Now, we live in a time where it seems everybody believes very different things. And you might ask, well, is that good for society? It seems that maybe it's causing social division. So you can see how somebody would say it's much better if everybody believes the same. Of course, then the question is, well, how would you get people to believe all the same things? And that's going to be a separate question, which I'm not sure he gives a lot of answer to. But there's this idea that it's good for people in society to have a lot of shared beliefs. Then there's a second idea, which I think is especially striking. It's that what counts as true is what's good for society. And you should encourage beliefs which are good for society. So one example of this is belief in ghosts. So what Mohi was arguing, Mosi was arguing, is that if people believe in ghosts, then they will believe they're ghosts. The ghost will punish them if they behave badly. And maybe they will reward them if they behave well. So belief in ghosts would make people behave better. So therefore, they argued that really ghosts existed because that's what's good for society. Seems a sort of surprising claim, really. Generally, we would think like whether ghosts exist is independent of whether it's good for society. Some things, the existence of some things may be bad for society, but they can still exist. But what Mosi wanted to say was no, that we should at least treat things as true if they're good for society. Another very striking aspect to this view is a challenge to the idea that we should give preference to our families in our behavior. Certainly in ancient China, there was the general idea that you looked after your own family and you gave you did what you could for your own family, and then you help other people maybe if you have any resources left over, but basically you make your effort for your family, especially your own kids. The Mohists said you should love everybody equally, so that you should not be giving preference to your own family, rather you should be spreading your efforts out much more widely. And again, the idea is, well, that's what's good for society. It's a pretty surprising claim, because I think one of the main reasons is it's surprising is it's pretty hard for us to imagine a society in which parents don't favor their own children. It's like, well, that would be rather odd to live in that kind of society, where like the children, you have your children, you have other people's children, and you don't show any differential preference for your own children to rather compared to other children. It's a very surprising view. I guess the other thing that's surprising about it is that uh, it's not just about kind of preferences and behavior, it's also called a principle of universal love, equal care and concern. Uh, Now, I think maybe we have a sort of natural tendency to love our own families, even when they're annoying, while often we find other people and strangers, it's pretty hard to feel motivated to care about them. Maybe you can care about them a little bit, and if you're walking by a stranger in need, you might be moved to try and help them. Uh, Generally, the further removed they are from you, the harder it is to care for them. But the view of the Mohist is you should care about everybody in your society. So that's definitely quite a surprising view. Uh, I guess we might, one term that I'm tempted to use for it is like it sounds a bit communist. It's like the idea that really what's important is just the society, and you should put all of your priorities in helping society and none in your own life or your own family. And uh, that's an idea which many people, aren't going to be too fond of. Right. So in treating other people, you want to love everybody. You don't focus on your own family, and they thought that that kind of equal treatment and mutual respect would lead to the best society. We may wonder how realistic that kind of approach is. So now we're going to talk about the school of names and then a reaction to the school of names by later Mohists. So the school of names was this fairly short-lived approach of trying to be kind of very provocative and talking about a lot of paradoxes and absurdities uh, and um, leading people to kind of I think it seems like their idea was to provoke people to make them think harder. Whether or not they succeeded in that, I guess they did succeed to some extent because then the Mohists reacted against them. Um, exactly what they wanted to achieve is a little bit hard to grasp. There's plenty of debate about it. Uh, but they certainly kind of gave examples, seem to suggest they want language to be used more carefully, and they want to find the contradictions and complexities in human reasoning and getting more philosophy. That all sounds great, but the way they went about it is more surprising. The main person associated with this view is Hui Shi, who was especially known for his 10 theses. And we're going to look at those in a second. There's also a famous example. I think it's he makes an argument that a white horse is not a horse, and that's it seems like, well, that's just absurd. Obviously, a white horse is a horse, a brown horse is a horse, a black horse is a horse. But he makes this argument that a white horse is not a horse. And you think, well, is he just trying to be annoying? What's going on here? But I guess the claim is he's trying to kind of get people to think about how to understand language. He definitely seems to be interested in finitude and infinity, on the limits of language and logic. And he also may be trying to get people to be more kind of humble in what they can try and prove. And those are all possibilities. Here are his 10 theses. We only actually have one source for this, uh, and it was published later on by a different group of philosophers. But now looking at these, they're pretty puzzling. Uh, Either because you're not clear why somebody would write that down, or else like it just seems to be somewhat self-contradictory. So, I mean, some of the stuff about size sort of makes sense. He says that which has no thickness cannot be piled up, yet it is 1,000 li in dimension. It's not exactly clear what he's saying, but I mean, part of the idea is maybe saying if you have a line with no thickness, then if you have lots of lines, then then they wouldn't add up to any more thickness. And so he's like, how do you kind of fill out a larger object? Then there's the idea like the sun at noon is the sun setting, the thing born is the thing dying. So certainly that's true, that the sun at different times is still the sun. As you grow old, you're born and then you die. But exactly what point is he making about that? That's not so clear. Then he says, he's there in China. He says the southern region has no limit and yet has a limit. Maybe he's making a geographical point there, but maybe he's making some other point. It's a bit unclear. He says, I set off for UA today and came there yesterday. Well, that either like there's some missing part of the story, or he's claiming he can do time travel. It's just again very odd. So those are the 10 theses, and we get some idea of what he was trying to do, but it's up for debate. Okay. Certainly, there's some aspect of this, like the School of Names is trying to challenge the certainty of knowing and trying to get people to be more guarded or careful in their claims. And maybe there's an element where they were introducing some kind of relativism, which is the idea that there is no absolute truth, rather, it's just everybody has their own perspective. It's not clear they were definitely arguing for that, but maybe they were pushing in that sort of direction. I think for us today, we're quite comfortable with some kinds of relativism. We're kind of comfortable with relativism about what's fashionable. You could say you have your beliefs about what's fashionable, I have my beliefs, and there's no total right answer. You might say that even with morality, maybe at least many people are tempted to think there is no absolute truth about morality. Rather, some people believe one thing and other people believe other things, and that's all there is to it. There's no way to resolve that. Becomes harder to accept relativism when it comes to things which are meant to be totally factual, like mathematics and science. Then it seems very odd to say that I have my scientific truth and you have a different scientific truth. If I think that the COVID vaccine is dangerous and you think it's safe, then it seems like, well, one of us is right and one of us is wrong. There is some kind of absolute truth to that. And we can't just say, well, you each have your own perspective and there's no way to resolve it. It's like we want to say, no, there is actually a fact to be discovered. So we're not going to totally embrace relativism, but maybe we're going to be willing to accept some relativism. We're going to be looking soon at more ideas of relativism in ancient Greece when we start looking at the sophists. So there was the school of names with their kind of somewhat puzzling claims about reasoning and logic. And the Mohists kind of said, okay, you've made your point, and we do need to kind of get clearer about logic. So they worked on developing clear logical standards to respond to philosophical challenges and improve reasoning consistency. They gave a law of non-contradiction, that something can't be and not be at the same time. And they put a lot more emphasis into kind of rational dialogue. So maybe the school of names had a good effect on the Mohists and like getting them to be more logical. So they started to spell out their logical reasoning. In ancient Greek philosophy, it was especially Aristotle who's known for setting out ideas of logical reasoning. So we see a sort of parallel in ancient China. You have the Mohists trying to spell out what it is to logically reason, and in the Western side, you had Aristotle doing that. All right. So now we're going to move on to the Taoists. And the Taoists, I think, are far more kind of appealing in terms of their kind of the general attitude. Although we may have some worries about to what extent you want to completely endorse them, or whether they are really an alternative to the other views. So the ideas of Taoism, there's two main texts. One is known as the Laozi, and the other is known as the Zhuangzi. And they both talk a lot about naturalness and simplicity. So they talk about like the cosmic Tao. Confucius was interested in the cosmic Tao too. He had his own views about cosmic Tao, and we've already talked about that. The Taoists think that really the way to live is being intuitive. So they're not so interested in kind of logical argument. They I think their attitude is, of course, you can argue for anything. What's really important is working out what's intuitive, experiencing the world, and living in harmony with the world. So in some ways, it's kind of like an anti-philosophical view, because they're saying that being all philosophical about stuff isn't really going to give you the answer. Rather, what you need to do is go out there and experience the world, live, and that will tell you what a good life is. They think that the Tao is a kind of universal source, and this path, this cosmic force, is a kind of origin of all existence, and it guides human behavior and emphasizes harmony with nature and effortless action. We'll talk a bit more about effortless action and why that they think that's so important. In addition to kind of doubting philosophy, they're all a bit skeptical about the power of language. They don't necessarily think that language is actually that great, because they think that language can't really capture the most important truths. So rather than thinking you can have like a clear logic describing everything, they think that metaphors and poetry are going to be just as important in living life. So one of the kind of central idea of the Taoists is that you should live your life with naturalness and simplicity. And that's going to provide peace and balance. So it's going to make a better society if everybody lives that kind of life. And one of the big ideas is that you should be non-materialistic. You shouldn't be holding on to lots of property, lots of goods, lots of bling. None of that is going to be good for you. It's not actually going to make you happy. Rather, you should lead a simple life, and that will give you contentment and make you able to live with spontaneity. So they definitely are not fans of all the artificial social norms. So while Confucius spent a lot of time saying we need to carry out all these old traditions because they hold us all together, the Taoists are like, who cares about all those old traditions? Let's do away with all those old traditions. Just do what feels good. Do what is natural and simple. All right. So we'll look at Zhuangzi. He lived like about 369 to 286 BCE. He was a big Taoist, and his main work was named after him, known as the Zhuangzi. So these ideas are going to be now pretty familiar to you. He thinks that you should be finding your natural place to restore harmony and reduce human strife. One idea he has, he thinks that stories and anecdotes are going to be just as important, maybe even more important in trying to understand the world. So rather than kind of give abstract philosophical arguments, if you use stories, that's what is actually going to give you more insight into life. So there's a lot of emphasis on intuition and using your experience to understand the world. So rather than trying to reason everything out or argue everything out, he thinks that having experiences is going to be very good. And certainly kind of all the kind of the social norms, all the kind of all the stuff that goes with the hierarchy. If you go to a fancy restaurant, they'll give you like lots of knives and forks, and you have to the social conventions about which ones you use at which times. There's like social conventions about what you should wear. If you have a fancy job, you're meant to wear a suit and tie or a kind of smart clothes. And it seems that Zhuangzi just wanted to kind of move away from all that and says like, to kind of just be spontaneous. Do what don't spend all this money on fancy clothes. Just live at one with nature. He also believed in the idea of authenticity. So rather than trying to live up to social expectations, he thought people should try to be true to themselves. So you discover like what you value and you live by that. You don't live by what society tells you to do. So clearly, this sort of view encourages a kind of disrespect or a lack of interest in what society is saying and what people in society think is important. Certainly, they're not interested in everybody believing the same thing. Instead, what they believe is important is just being true to yourself and being intuitive. So there's a lot of questioning of all the norms. And certainly if a ritual is not meaningful, then they think there's no reason to do it. So it's a complete contradiction of the ideas of Confucius. That doesn't mean all ritual is going to be meaningless. It may be that getting married is a useful ritual. Maybe your high school graduation was meaningful to you. So some rituals can be perfectly meaningful. on the other hand, if it's like just a ritual for the sake of ritual, they want to say do away with it. There's also this idea of not being worried about death. Uh, Obviously, back then, death was very common, and obviously, death is very common now. We all die. So, and people, in some ways, people were very kind of much more close to death back then. Certainly, child mortality was very high. So his view was that we should not uh, view death as something terrible, and we shouldn't necessarily engage in lots of mourning of dead people. We should just see death as something that naturally happens, and kind of be accepting of it. Certainly, it was a kind of very challenging view, going against the kind of conventional wisdom. Certainly they weren't in favor of the kind of the idea of fixed truth. They kind of thought that it seems also a little bit of relativism here too, that maybe truth is not absolute or fixed, rather truth can change, can vary from person to person. They think that meaning is fairly a matter of convention and is changing. Language is not something that is easy to, it doesn't well define the most important things. And so they really encourage a kind of fluid approach to life. And then there's this idea of harmony and everyday mastery and effortless living. Uh, one example of mastery, which is probably not going to be very familiar to most of us, is carving an ox. I've never taken any, have I taken? Well, I think I have cut up raw chicken. And I guess if you've ever tried to cut up a chicken, there are good ways to do it and bad ways to do it. Uh, and you can imagine doing that with other animals. Obviously, an ox is a large animal and takes a lot of cutting. There are many parts to it. Uh, and so he gives the example of the butcher who is so skilled that he is able to cut up an ox and his blade never loses its sharpness. So he's never kind of hitting bone. He's always able to get his knife in the parts of the animal which make it most easy to cut up. So there's a kind of ease of living, and he says that kind of mastery of life is a very good thing. And he kind of counts that as a kind of natural, it's a natural way to live. We might think about other sorts of examples. Yeah, maybe a nice one is cooking. Some people are kind of good cooks. Some people are not great cooks. And cooking is also something which takes a lot of practice. And then some people can cook effortlessly. They can cook great meals effortlessly. So there's you have an everyday mastery, and they think that's a kind of a good way to live. So there's this kind of idea that if you lead your life in a way which there's not lots of struggle, that's good. So they believe that that's the kind of skill and wisdom that are really good to have. So it's not just a kind of philosophy, it's actually a skill of living which they really value. And the person we want to talk about is Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu lived earlier. He lived in the 6th century BCE. Uh, and he's credited with authoring the Tao Te Ching, known as the Book of Changes. It's one of the best known books of ancient Chinese wisdom. There's some debate about whether he actually existed. Maybe there's not a whole lot of evidence, but certainly there's lots of talk of him living. So now by this stage, you're going to be very familiar with the kinds of ideas that he sets out. There's the idea of the Tao as the fundamental force shaping society. There's the idea of being in harmony with the Tao for balance and wisdom. Uh, there's using simple and maybe even vague language to avoid misrepresenting deep fundamental truths. Uh, and he thinks that true understanding of the way to live comes from lived experience and intuitive insight. So he's not so much in favor of like always analyzing everything. So there's a strong emphasis on the idea of the limits of words, where language can't express the true nature of profound concepts like Tao. Uh, and so you have to be a little bit cautious when you're using language. Maybe it's better to use it in kind of poetic ways or with stories. Certainly, he favors a life of simplicity and harmony with nature, encouraging contentment and balance in life. And certainly rejecting the pursuit of wealth. He thinks that that's not a good way to live. And worrying about your status is also not good. So it's a kind of a relatively humble life that they're advocating, but they think it's pretty good. Now, there is a kind of question about what does it mean to live simply? And so you can see how maybe it was possible for them, although we might still have questions about what was it like for the people in ancient China. We might also wonder how is it going to be possible in the 21st century to live like this? Can you is it possible to lead a simple life without many material goods and be happy? Well, there are challenges for that, right? I mean, to a large extent, many of us feel like there's not many options apart from you have to have a job, you have to have somewhere to live, you have to be able to pay taxes. And even with that bare minimum, you're kind of in the rat race already. So the idea that you're just going to like move upstate and live in a hut doesn't seem very realistic. I mean, many of us don't necessarily have the skills to grow our own food, and I mean, how good would you be at like chasing a deer and killing it, and then skinning it, carving it up, and cooking it? Probably a challenge. So it seems like we can see how living a simple life has its appeals. Some lives are more simple than others. Some people some people devote their whole life to getting more stuff. If you ever heard somebody complaining because it's really hard to own 3 houses, it's like, well, I'm sure it is, but like maybe if you led a simple life, you wouldn't have that sort of problem. Or having lots of cars, having lots of stuff. You know, it's a bit like the complaint about it's really hard to find good servants these days. I was like, well, look after yourself, then you won't have that sort of problem. So the kind of life of riches we can see how that might be not what the Taoists approve of. But even for the rest of us, like it seems like we have to own some stuff. And then is like to what extent we can live in harmony with nature. Certainly in New York City, many people never go out to nature. The closest they get to nature is like Central Park. So and Central Park isn't really very wild. So it's thinking about these Taoist ideas and how you'd apply them in everyday life, I think it is certainly interesting, maybe challenging. But the Taoists basically think that until everybody does that, your life is going to be full of conflict and social disorder. So they think that a simple life is really the solution to society's problems. So definitely, like they reject artificial categories. Laozi teaches that beauty and ugliness, or wealth and poverty, are artificial distinctions that limit understanding. So he teaches that you need to accept things as they are, embrace complexity without trying to categorize everything, and you need to understand the interconnectedness of all the universe. Right. So those are the kind of main ideas in the ancient philosophy that we want to be thinking about.